The CEO leaned close and whispered, "Pretend you are my husband." Just as the nurse called his name, the single father had been sitting alone in the hospital hallway for hours, palms pressed together, knees bouncing, staring at a scuffed patch of floor that felt like the only solid thing left in his life. When suddenly a woman in an immaculate suit slid into the chair beside him, her perfume sharp and expensive, her eyes calm on the surface but frantic underneath. And before he could ask who she was or why she was there, she spoke those impossible words. In a voice so low it barely carried, telling him to stand, to put his arm around her, to trust her just for this moment, because the test results they were about to hear would change everything. And in that instant his quiet, private fear collided with a world he had never touched. Because moments earlier he had been just another exhausted dad waiting to find out if the pain in his chest was stress or something that would leave his daughter without a parent. A man who worked nights stocking shelves, who packed lunches with handwritten notes, who learned to braid hair from online videos. After his wife died, and now he was being pulled into a performance he did not understand by a woman whose presence alone commanded the hallway, the staff straightening when she stood, the whispers following her heels. And as they walked together toward the consultation room, his arms stiff at first, then instinctively protective when he felt her hand tremble against his back. He realized she was afraid, not of money or reputation, but of being seen as alone, because inside that room waited a board member and a physician who knew her as a powerful chief executive, not as a woman facing a diagnosis she had hidden for months, a diagnosis that threatened her position in a company built on her unbreakable image. And she needed a husband beside her to make them believe she was stable, supported, not weak. And as the door closed behind them, and the doctor began speaking in careful, measured words, the single dad felt the weight of two lives pressing on his chest. His own test results folded into hers, because when the doctor turned to him first and said the word benign, relief crashed through him so hard his vision blurred. Yet before he could breathe it out, the doctor turned to her, and the pause before speaking was long enough to feel like a lifetime. And when the word cancer finally landed, quiet and clinical, he felt her body lean into his, as if instinct knew where safety lived. And without thinking he squeezed her hand, grounding her, whispering that she was not alone, even though they had met less than an hour earlier and in the days that followed. What began as a lie told for survival became something neither of them expected, because she asked him to stay. Not for appearances, but because she had seen how gently he listened, how he asked questions no one else thought to ask, how he spoke about his daughter with a softness that reminded her of the parts of herself she had buried under quarterly reports and shareholder meetings. And he stayed because he recognized the look in her eyes, the one that comes when strength has been demanded for too long and finally runs out. And as treatments began and rumors swirled, they created a quiet partnership built on honesty rather than contracts, sharing cafeteria coffee at dawn, talking about fear without trying to conquer it, about dignity not as power but as presence. And one night when his daughter was admitted for an asthma scare and he was once again waiting alone under flickering lights, she arrived breathless from a board meeting she had abandoned without apology, sat beside him, and took his hand the same way he had taken hers. And in that mirrored moment, they understood that what bound them was not pretense, but recognition. Two people from opposite worlds choosing compassion over isolation. And when her remission was announced months later, she stepped to the podium alone in public but reached for him in private, thanking him not for pretending but for standing, for reminding her that resilience is quieter than ambition and far stronger. And when he finally returned to that same hallway for a routine checkup, no longer alone, he realized the high-stakes moment that once terrified him had given him something he never expected, a bond formed in fear that survived truth, a proof that humanity does not care about titles, only about who sits beside you when the waiting feels endless. And long after the whispers faded, long after the lie was no longer needed, the memory of that first sentence stayed with both of them, not as a deception, but as the beginning of a connection that changed two lives forever by choosing dignity, sacrifice, and compassion when it mattered most. What neither of them realized was that the lie had already done its quiet work. In the months after remission and recovery, after hospital bracelets were cut away and the waiting rooms faded into memory, the bond they shared did not dissolve the way temporary alliances usually do. Instead, it settled into something steady and real. Because the single father returned to his ordinary life with a difference he could feel in his chest, a calm that came from knowing someone had chosen him not out of need, but out of recognition. And the CEO returned to a corner office, changed in ways no quarterly report could show, because power no longer thrilled her the way presence did. And one evening she stood in the doorway of his small apartment, the smell of home-cooked food in the air, his daughter laughing on the floor as she tried to teach her how to braid hair. And in that unremarkable moment, the truth finally surfaced, without whispers or pretending, that the strongest partnerships are not built in boardrooms or born from perfection, but forged in fear, waiting, and shared vulnerability. And when she admitted that the words "pretend you are my husband" had been the bravest thing she had ever said, not because it fooled anyone else, but because it allowed her to finally stop standing alone, he understood that his quiet endurance had always had value, even before someone powerful noticed it. And years later, when people asked how two lives from such different worlds had intersected, there was no dramatic explanation, only the simple truth that dignity recognizes dignity, that compassion answers fear without needing permission, and that sometimes the moment that feels like the loneliest point of your life is actually the doorway to a connection strong enough to change everything, a reminder that humanity does its most powerful work in hospital hallways, whispered sentences, and the choice to sit beside someone and stay. Years later, the hospital hallway no longer smelled like fear, but the memory never left. In the final chapter of their story, the single father stood once more beneath the same pale lights, this time holding a small framed photo of his late wife, and another of the woman who had once whispered a desperate sentence that changed his life. And he understood how waiting had shaped him, how sitting alone with uncertainty had carved space in his heart for something deeper than survival, because the CEO, no longer introduced by her title but by her name, was down the hall, volunteering quietly with patients who had not. One beside them, having learned that presence is the greatest currency a person can offer, and when she joined him on the bench where their story began. Neither spoke for a long time, as if words might cheapen what silence had already proven, and in that stillness he realized that the lie had never been about pretending to be something they were not. It had been about revealing who they already were, beneath fear and status, to people who chose to sit with pain instead of running from it. And as they eventually stood to leave hands, brushing, no urgency, no performance, the hallway echoed with a softer truth that stayed with them long after the doors closed, that love sometimes enters a life disguised as necessity, that dignity grows when shared, and that the most powerful connections are not planned or promised, but born in moments when two strangers choose humanity over isolation, leaving a mark that time can never erase.